Hi. So we're going to talk for a while, and then we're going to turn it over to you guys. This is an interesting for me because Richard and I have been talking about sort of LA and noir and what it means for a long time. So with that in mind, I want to start by asking a question that has absolutely nothing to do with LA or noir. The first time you and I ever spoke a long time ago, you talked about I think you called it the British model of literary life, the sort of belles lettres approach. You know, you write a couple of novels, you write some nonfiction books, do some journalism, maybe a little film work, and you kind of piece together a career. And I think that your career is kind of an exemplar of that sort of style of approach. So I wanted to ask you about that as a kind of way to conceptualize the writing life.
Yeah, well, it's why it hasn't gone so well. I think that the literary life in London was you you go to university, you come out of university with this unfocused ambition to be a writer. You start writing typically for magazines and getting kind of gigs for newspapers, and with the hope of writing a book. And my sort of career as a writer really began. I'd been working for kind of rock and roll type magazines and interviewing pop stars and movie stars and stuff like that, all of which was good fun, and writing book reviews. And it came together in a kind of more focused way. And to this man, I kind of owe a lot of both good and bad things when this guy called Bill Buford, who was then editing a literary magazine called Granta out of above a hairdresser's salon in Cambridge in England, invited me to go to work for him. And I published a short story about a love affair I'd had, believe it or not, with a Playboy bunny. And it was a long time ago. And Bill encouraged me to, get serious about writing and editing, and that story became a book, and then kind of launched me on this piecemeal career. And so yes, it has been that I've patched together something in America that resembled what I had in London, which is to say, bits of this, bits of that. Whereas here, I think that especially in this town, the expectation is that you either write for a newspaper, or you write more hopefully for books or TV, or you can be this other kind of, for TV or film, or you can be this other kind of alien species in LA who is the book writer.
Right.
And you get kind of looked at balefully by these people who are earning, a gazillion times more money than you are. And who sort of say, oh, well, I guess you write too.
Right, right. And then you become the book writer who writes books about Los Angeles, or in some, not exclusively, but a number of your books have been about Los
Right.
Angeles. So what, I guess, I'm interested in sort of you touch on it in the last chapter of this book, which is a personal note where you kind of contextualize what this story means
Right.
for you, and talk about your early experiences of LA, some of which I think are come out in LA Without a Map, and then and sort of how you kind of got almost seduced against your will by Los Angeles. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the mysterious allure of the city.
Right. I mean, we've my wife and I have lived here now for 18 years, and our kids were born in Santa Monica, so they are Los Angelinos, and I have never quite been able to explain to myself what the nature of my connection to the place is, which is why I think I've gone on writing and writing about it. But I know that the connection is powerful, and it's changed. And that, like a lot of people, when I first came here, which was in the early 80s, just before the Olympics, or just around the time of the Olympics, I looked around and thought, oh, God, this place is so great. Everybody's so up for it. It's so not like London. It's so not like Manchester and Bradford, and I'm going to come here and just have a terrific time. And I did. And we came to live here at the beginning of the 90s. And then this was when I'd already had this period of time working for Granta, and the Rodney King riots kicked off. And Bill Buford called me from London and said, "Get yourself out on the streets." And I said, "Bill, you want me to get killed?" He said, "No, but injured will be good." And so I did, and I wrote a story for Granta about the riots that was published in a lot of places, and indeed, you know, you wonderfully put it in one of your anthologies. And that led to getting a lot of gigs for the New York Times Magazine. And they put it together that because I had this, what Americans erroneously perceive as this charming English persona.
It's the accent.
That I got sent into these kind of situations with institutions. And the first institution was the LAPD. And the New York Times Magazine, in that way, that grand way they do, they said, "Well, Richard, we want you to go and ride around in the back of police cars for 3 months and decide whether what Willie Williams is doing can work." So Joe Rodriguez, the photographer, and I did just that. And we spent a lot of time, unsurprisingly, observing that, you know, that the LAPD wasn't going to change so much after the Rodney King riots. But getting to know a lot of cops, and the photographer was this tough Puerto Rican guy. And one of the cops we got to know was this black homicide detective called Cedric Wilder, who was an ace dude. And he'd been watching us for several days. And Cedric said, "You know, I figured it out what you guys are doing. It's good cop, bad cop." He said, "But there's a twist. People think Richard's the good cop, but really he's the bad cop." But having these experiences of writing about the riots and writing about the LAPD made me feel very differently about the city. I started to see its dysfunctionality, and I really enjoyed the fact that I saw it in a darker way. It began to explain itself better to me. And then, over a period of time, and this is really what the source of, you know, this book has narratives that are layered on top of it, and it's very kind of specific about the period of time that it's covering and the stories that it's telling. But one of the things that it's trying to do, or the thing that's most meaningful to me that it's trying to do, is to explain to myself why it is that I feel that this is such a dark place in so many ways, and how that feeling has evolved through history and when it crystallized. And the argument of the book, whether it's right or not, is that feeling that, let's call it for the sake of argument, noir, crystallized in Los Angeles as the boom years of the 20s turned into the early years of the Depression.
Right, and I think one of the things that's interesting about this book, and also about your, or about it in line with your other writings about Los Angeles, is that you play on the one hand with the glamour, and then you see the sort of sordidness underneath. And that's one of the things that seems to me to be one of the roots of noir, and it comes out here in terms of, you know, Mulholland and the Dam, in terms of Doheny and the murder of his son, in terms of even the central, I don't know how much we want to actually give away, but the central sort of event at the heart of the book, which right. I'll let you give that away if anyone's going to give it away. I think we'll see their pictures up there at a certain point. But it's all about illusion on the one hand, appearance on the one hand, and then this much darker, more complicated thing that's happening underneath, and who has the power and who has the access, and how they get it.
Right. I mean, the central story of the book really concerns this, and he's such an Angelino prototype. This very, that's the former chief of the LAPD, J. Edgar Davis. And there's also a wonderful shot that you'll see at some point where he's leading. He was a crack marksman,